to start with you just telling Iowans just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Marco Battaglia, and I was born and raised here, actually not far from where we're at right now, in Des Moines, and I grew up on the north side, and then now I live on the south side with my family right by the airport, and went to school here, Hoover in Des Moines, went to the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. I was actually a communications and media major, actually electronic media. One thing that was cool that actually happened in this campaign cycle is one of my old professors, Ron Steele, he covered our story. So it was just cool for me personally, probably not to anybody else, but yeah, then I moved, after living in Cedar Falls and Waterloo, I moved back to the Des Moines area to be close to my parents, because they're getting up there into their 80s, and then I started my family, got 2 sons. For the last 6 years, I've been working at the women's prison in Mitchellville, so not too far from here either there. I have run for office a number of times, and I felt like both the party and myself have done like increasingly better each time, and we've actually made history a number of times. So I feel pretty good about what we've accomplished, and I still feel good about this race, even with some of the setbacks that have happened.
So before we get into all of that, what made you decide to run for the 3rd congressional seat this time?
Mainly it was, so early on I did not think I would run. I kind of resigned to not running again until my boys were grown up, until they're 18. But what happened was I saw that there wasn't anybody running from the Libertarian Party, and that concerned me because I was hoping there'd be at least 2 or 3 people in a primary. And then when that time passed, I just started looking into the incumbent and then also the challengers. And the one actually that I personally was the most in favor of was the one that got beat in her primary. So then I was like, well, we still have a chance according to Iowa code. I looked back through like the votes and the history of what these people were saying, and I really felt like there was nobody I could vote for, or nobody that represented the people like me or the people that have supported me. So then I decided we're doing it. And it was really off to the races and going, I felt really well. And then a few things happened that were newsworthy, but but yeah, I still feel really good about what we're doing and what my team's doing, and the people that I've been talking to just had a really warm reception, and I think there are a lot of issues that that need talked about that maybe aren't getting talked about.
So I wanted to talk about the Libertarians being kicked off the ballot. For Iowans who don't know, the Iowa Objections Panel said that you guys didn't meet some of the requirements for the county conventions, and then that case went all the way up to the Iowa Supreme Court, and they did uphold that decision. You have mentioned that you are still doing a write-in campaign. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so historically I think there's maybe 2 or a few people that have won write-in campaigns for Congress in this country. So, there's a chance. But it's important to us specifically because, so the Supreme Court and the Iowa GOP's attorney basically said, because we did this convention and then a nominating convention that was a matter of minutes too close together, our delegates didn't count according to Iowa code, and then also basically that our rights weren't violated by being kicked off the ballot because we could run as write-in candidates still. So that was almost like a challenge, right? You're either exercising your rights or you don't have them, and that's kind of been something that I say a lot in this campaign. But also, you know, we had these events, we had the door knocking, we had the materials, so it didn't make sense to me to just bow out when you got kind of hit with that curveball. So we obviously disagreed with the decision. We admitted that this did happen. You know, this matter of time didn't pass according to Iowa code. It was a mistake, but we didn't think the answer was getting stripped of the ballot access.
So talking a little bit more about the write-in campaign specifically, what are you hearing from supporters? You know, as you're meeting with them, what are you telling them? You know, I don't think a lot of Iowans exactly know or have, you know, been through a write-in campaign.
Yeah, I think that personally myself am in an okay position because I've been on the ballot for Des Moines City Council. I came in 3rd out of 7. Been on the ballot statewide for Attorney General, where I got, you know, sometimes 20 to 30% of the vote in these counties in my some of the counties in my district, and then I helped us get our major party status as the lieutenant governor candidate on the ballot. So I think I'm in an okay position for people to remember, you know, to write in Marco Battaglia if they're not thrilled about the other 2 options, or if they're not already choosing to vote for none of the above. That's a thing that we always say, is that none of the above is always an option, and a lot of people choose that, I think, when they don't see somebody they can vote for and they don't vote, or they write in, you know, some celebrity name or something, or whatever they do. There was one thing that I wanted to think about, was actually like, apparently in some states, write-in candidates have put a sticker with their name on it and like handed it out to people, or advocated the people just putting that on their ballot. But I don't, after what's already transpired, I don't want to do something that's going to like cause attention in a bad way, you know. So we're just door knocking, still having events, and basically just doing our best to bring that up every stop of the way, that we're still in it. So I don't think we're going to do any kind of special sticker gimmick or anything, but we're just going to do the best we can to keep the word out.
For sure. And before we get into all the different issues and stuff that you're running on, I did want to ask, you know, because of this, you know, ballot issue, obviously political parties can appoint poll watchers and things like that, you know, just to make sure that things are being counted correctly and whatnot. Is that something the Libertarians are doing at all, do you know?
I don't think that we've ever done that. We certainly, you know, have concerns about the way that additional parties in general have been treated, and the way independent candidates have been treated. But personally, for me and my team, that hasn't been a big concern. I feel like everyone that's ever voted for me, Marco Battaglia, I feel like their vote was counted. And once the Supreme Court made the decision they did, you know, we accepted it. We weren't like showing up to protest that decision. They just told us we have to be write-in candidates for this cycle, and that's what we're doing.
Sure. So now kind of getting into the issues, what are those, you know, major priorities for you as a candidate?
For all 3 of us, I would say property rights is big. I haven't actually heard, and maybe they have, I hope they have, I haven't heard none or become give a take on like the pipeline projects that are really a big deal to a lot of Iowans right now. And by property rights, what I mean is if a project of any kind is going to come through an Iowan's property, there needs to be a fair deal. It needs to be an offer, and the property owner needs to accept that offer. I personally am opposed to eminent domain entirely, especially in, you know, this, maybe historically there were good reasons for it, but I don't think in the current time and in the future there's really much good reason to say we're taking your property for whatever the project is, whether it's a pipeline or anything. I think there's a way you can come to a good deal with almost anybody, I think.
So is that something where you would like to see get rid of eminent domain?
I would definitely like to see whatever branch of government does it, whether it's the judicial, like the Supreme Court, I would like to see them right what I feel are some wrongs in the past and make it a lot tougher to use eminent domain. But personally, I would like to see it done away with entirely as an option, or at very least, it should be a last resort option, and there should be like almost an emergency that's going to affect the whole of a people of a district or of a state or of the country. At very least, it needs to be a pressing emergency, not just a company's project.
So if you were elected to Congress, what would you work on to address the use of eminent
Pretty
domain?
much use every bit of power that we have to do away with eminent domain, whether that's legislation, who we push to get into positions of power, and just using our voice and our role as representatives to move away from eminent domain. And it was up to me entirely.
So whenever you're talking about this, you mentioned that you would like to see eminent domain get rid of it completely. So what would happen then if you did have some public utility like a highway, a road, gas, electricity, that sort of thing, getting to rural Iowans?
I think when rural Iowans are feeling something like that, like they team up together, whether they're red or blue or gold or whatever, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, I don't think there's not going to be pressure on the politicians like there are right now. If that was the situation, the pressure would be flipped and it would be pressure to get this project done. So either we're going to make a much better price that these people aren't going to refuse, or they'll be pushing people to this is the right reason to have eminent domain, and I think there'll be options no matter what. I think we're way too far to the let's use eminent domain for whatever we want to use it for, to even really have to worry about that time coming where we have no eminent domain whatsoever.
And so that was one issue that you said you were running on. Are there any other big issues that you
A big one for me for the last 10 years has been to move away from like the drug war, to legalize and decriminalize cannabis. But we also talk about psilocybin a lot, which is a medicine that comes from mushrooms, and also harm reduction in terms of broader problems like the opioid problem, just drug addiction of all kinds in general. I've felt strongly and been an advocate for having these kinds of plant-based and fungi medicines, because I think they're just they actually do things like help people get away from substance abuse of other kinds of substances. And I think there's just a lot that Iowans are learning about, and they've been learning about really rapidly for the last 10 years. So now, it's pretty acceptable among, people from young parents to senior citizens to utilize cannabis as medicine now. That really wasn't the case when I first ran, 10 years ago. It was still controversial. And then now I think kind of psilocybin has moved into that territory, but there are members of the Iowa legislature that are strong advocates for the freedom to utilize this. Some take it from like a religious liberty perspective, and some take it from a medical freedom perspective. And I basically take it as this is a plant a fungi that grows in our backyard perspective, so we shouldn't be locking people up over it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of tripartisan agreement coming together on especially, the plant-based and fungi that are still contraband or illicit. So that's been a big one for me. And then another big one has been just the tax burden kind of all together, like reducing the tax burden for all Iowans. But I've been a big advocate for starting from the bottom of the tax bracket. A lot of people argue about taxing the wealthy or taxing the rich. I think we can, have some common ground, and let's reduce the tax burden for all Iowans, but let's start from the bottom up.
For sure. kind of going back to the legalizing marijuana and the other drug you talked about, I know this is at a more state level, but one of the things, Republicans have said is that, if they legalize marijuana, it's a gateway drug. They have concerns that, it'll lead to them using other drugs and things like that. I guess what's kind of your response there on that?
Well, I firmly disagree is my initial response. It's not been my experience. It's not been what I've seen on the ground and on the front lines. It's not what I've seen from people that get incarcerated. And also, I feel like that's an argument going all the way back to the 40s and 50s. So maybe try to go out and talk to people, when you're door knocking, or talk to your constituents, because to me, that's a populist thing right now, is to legalize and decriminalize, especially cannabis. Iowa had a governor and senator, his name was Harold Hughes, and when he was in the Senate, it was 1971, I believe, he introduced legislation to legalize marijuana. So that's quite a while ago, and that was a senator from Iowa, so that'd be like, Grassley or Ernst doing that now. So it's weird to me that that was not controversial in 1971, but they're telling us it still might be controversial, 2024, 2025. It's just a strange area for me of trying to understand, where the people in power are coming from. And then also, I think that Iowa is unique in that, we're lagging behind a bunch of other states on that issue. So to me, there's more at play. Like if you look at who actually does get to grow cannabis in Iowa and who gets to sell it, that to me is the bigger picture. Like there's a market there that's kind of captured, and I would rather see, me or my neighbors be able to start our own business instead of just having to go through this really restricted medical market. But yeah, no, there's just, I think a lot of common ground that can be found among people that are going to vote, but we're stuck with some of these people in positions of power that are really not budging. But I don't know, it'll be interesting. Obviously some big things have happened. Like right now we don't have a lieutenant governor, technically, and I don't know, no one's really, I think the only person that's announced that they're running for governor so far is actually Charles Aldrich, who's one of our congressional candidates. So yeah, we don't know exactly how that's going to shake out there. So I hope that some big positive changes could happen to get some people open-minded on that topic, or at least change people's minds, if nothing else.
We talked a lot about the different issues that you're running on. Is there anything specific that you would like to see as your first piece of legislation?
I would honestly like to just make it a point to see someone in Congress understanding kind of the war powers and the currency powers, and just trying to represent the people of their district, first and foremost. So for me, probably a joining the fight to legalize and hopefully also decriminalize cannabis, but also being an advocate for this idea that if we're doing things that are going to potentially send ourselves or our sons and daughters to another country to fight in a war, Congress needs to be discussing that, and they need to be voting on that, and they need to be declaring a war. Because right now, we're heavily involved on a number of fronts, but yet no declaration of war from Congress. So I would like to see us actually pull back and fight to keep more money in District 3 and in our country, unless we do feel the need to declare a war. So to me, that would be right out the gates, like something that I am gonna, you'll hear about that, the first minute, the first day.
So just to clarify, are you saying that we don't need to send money to Israel or Ukraine or those unless we declare a war?
All of the above. To me, it's not even so much who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. Like, we got people in our district, let alone in our country, that are struggling, and we should get our own house and our own people in order before we really think about, world policing and all that.
Sure. I wanted to change just a little bit. One of the top issues for federal issues that voters are talking about is immigration. I wanted to just get your thoughts on that, and if there's any policy changes you would like to see from Congress.
Sure. It's an issue that is really personal to me because my my grandma was born actually here in the United States. Her parents were from Italy, so she came over, on a boat once, and then they went back to Italy on a boat. And then once my mom was born over there, they brought her back as a toddler. So if it wasn't for kind of that Ellis Island style of immigration, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't, but also on the other side of my dad's side, we've come from Scandinavian immigration. So, that was growing up on a farm and that kind of lifestyle for Minnesota. For him, it was Minnesota. And then for my mom's side, it was coming over here, and some of my family worked in coal mines. A lot of them moved to Madrid, Iowa. But, my grandma was making clothes and curtains and all kinds of materials. Some of my family were plumbers and masons and cabinet, woodworking, carpenters. So it's hard for me to hear some of like the, we just need to send people back where they came from kind of talk. I do hear the concerns and feel the concerns about securing the border. What I want to see, and what I think most Iowans want to see, is let's right now secure the border. But then I don't think there's very few people I feel that just want to stop immigration entirely. So we need to have like the real conversations, not it's also a reason why I think the third guy in there is important, or the third gal in there is important, because then we can't just frame this as pro versus anti sort of thing. We actually have to have the real conversations. So I'd say secure the border right away. Let's work together on that, but then let's move to a functioning system of immigration. One of my personal favorite presidents, for what it's worth, of all time is Kennedy, JFK, and I think we've badly needed immigration reform since that administration. So we're going on, half a century of badly needed immigration reform. And if the way, which I think it is the best way to get there, is work together to secure the border now, if that means National Guard, if it means pulling all the stops, declaring a national emergency, let's do that, and then let's work together on a functioning immigration system.
For sure. The other one that's really big, especially we're hearing from Democrats, is reproductive rights, abortion. What are your thoughts on that? Are you for, reproductive freedom, against? What does that look like?
It's another really challenging one. I fall in that camp that when the decision is mine to be involved in, I consider myself pro-life, but when the decision is not mine, I consider myself pro-choice. So when it comes from a standpoint of law, to me it's about what are we actually, not what the law says, but what actually happens. Are there people that, are there women that are forced to go through with like a dangerous situation to themselves or to the child, or both, because of this law? Are we policing people that are maybe having a miscarriage, or policing people that are, in a very vulnerable position? Like, is that, I don't think that that's what even the most extreme pro-life side really wants. And to me, that's, from a law enforcement standpoint, I'm like, what do you expect people to do? Like, I don't want to see people come to my work just because they had an abortion. So I think we need to have some real talk on this issue and transcend the kind of pro-choice versus pro-life. Like, I don't think there should be laws telling you can't have an abortion. And I think the majority of people don't want the extreme no abortions for any reason. But in Iowa, we're creeping closer and closer to that, and I think there is going to be very real pushback, because I don't think that's what anywhere near the majority of people that actually vote on a regular basis want. It's not what I want to see. To me, if you are pro-life, the most powerful thing you can do is work to get people better access to medicine and to birth control, and work to get people educated, work to help people know they have options if maybe they have an unwanted or a scary pregnancy. Give them the support that they need, but don't criminalize them. And again, it's obviously one of the big, heated, sensitive issues, but I'm glad that, we got to talk about it, because things are changing here.
So if you were elected to Congress, would you support codifying Roe, or do you think it is something that should be left up to the states?
See, that is another thing that's complicated, because I did support the ending of Roe versus Wade as we know it. But at the same time, I think that gives the power to people, if you're watching and you're in Iowa and you are firmly pro-choice, you have a lot of power to see who you're supporting in your legislature, to run for office, to speak up and make your voice heard. And I think you have more power after the Roe versus Wade decision than you did before. It's going to be this pendulum that now pushes the other way. And it just happened to happen at a time where we had, a trifecta of power of people that wanted this 6-week ban. So it kind of, and then we had a Supreme Court that was stacked in their favor, mainly Branstad and Reynolds appointed. So it was just the timing of that I think made this such a dramatic change for Iowa. But I think if you want it to be different, you have power, and you need to get out there and make it different. Probably not, I just don't see that fight really being won to go back at the federal level, but I do see that a fight that can be won, at the state level.
For sure. Another big issue, inflation. Obviously, we're hearing a lot about that, and then with that, we're hearing, affordable housing costs, problems, and things like that. Can you address that a little bit?
Sure. Inflation obviously is probably the number one thing I've heard from people while out door knocking or taking emails and calls, or at any event really. It's been inflation, because that's where everybody's feeling it. And really, if you don't have that power to hedge against inflation, which is, you got to have quite a bit of wealth to do that at this point with the way that we're feeling it. You're feeling it. So I think we actually need to take it head on, and what I advocate for is ending the Federal Reserve and moving away from a central bank. And this was a really popular movement if you go back to 2008, like the Wall Street protest, and if you go back to the Ron Paul campaigns and even the Rand Paul campaign for president. I feel like it's kind of been pushed to the side. But the three of us that are running as libertarians, well, now as write-in candidates, all agree that the best thing we could do is actually move away from this system entirely, because this is actually what we see as the cause of inflation, not just, they make these decisions with like price controls, and then we see booms and busts, but we don't actually see the dollar get better. It still gets devalued and devalued and devalued. And then as far as that relates to housing, this is maybe an area where I break from some of the typical libertarian thought. I support what's called housing first. And actually, so did Dr. Ben Carson, who was a pretty well-known Republican. I think he was one of the leading candidates for president in the last few cycles before Trump really hit the lead there and didn't look back. But housing first basically says, let's address the problem at the root and get people in housing. And then, we're not worried about the other issues that come along with that: poverty, substance abuse, not being able to hold a job. Let's get the housing solved first. and then we can focus on the substance abuse, the poverty, the getting in a position to where you can hold a job. Because really, I know people that are out on the streets in Des Moines right now, and it's so hard just to like see the next day, let alone think about getting a job, let alone think about getting a place where you can pay rent. Or so I've seen this from the ground level. I've seen this from, you know, working in the Department of Corrections. If some people wind up coming back because they honestly have no place to go. And in Iowa, over my lifetime, especially if you're a female, there really is no other place to go. We've closed mental health facilities. We've closed pretty much a lot of opportunities for females to feel safe on that path to getting a recovery from a crisis, or on that path from not having a job, not having a home. There's really not a lot of other options right now. So I think either we got to pool together as Iowans and the people of our different cities and towns, and we got to find an answer, or we got to look at housing first principles and address these problems at the root. Obviously, in terms of the bigger housing market, I feel like it's just the same thing all over again. Like, I like that movie, The Big Short. I thought that put it pretty well, but I think even the main guy from that, the actual person, is basically said, like, you know, we haven't changed anything. It's happening again. So to me, we gotta change things, and the way that we could attack it from Congress is housing first principles, get people in houses, and then we worry about the rest after the fact. And again, I know that's a break from maybe basic libertarian thought, because you're spending money, right, to get people in housing. But my counter argument to that is you're saving money, because now that these people have houses, they can work to get a job, they can grow their wealth, they're not going to hospitals, they're not going to prisons, they're not going to jails, you know, they're not maybe stealing because they have to, stealing to eat. You know, there's just there's so many ways that money winds up being saved in the long run if you address problems like housing at the root.
For sure. And kind of talking about, you know, the national debt and things like that, one issue that has been brought up is what's going to happen with Social Security. What do you think that answer is?
The realistic answer, the only thing that I think that is not sort of political speak, is that it goes away. There's no more money. It's becoming it becomes a negative at some point, because you have an aging population, you have inflation, things cost more people need it. We either have to accept it and do away with it, or we have to overhaul it and really protect it. And you know, I've seen, actually, I think both Nunn and Beckham take that stance of we need to protect it. And I think the only realistic answer is do away with it and work on creating new systems. So that's definitely a place where I, you know, have a much different response than the other people on the ballot do, as far as I know.
Do you have any ideas for another type of system?
I would say the first thing you would need to do is build that into your spending, that people that need it now are protected. So you build that into the budget. Like, if you are a senior citizen right now and that's how you survive, like, it would be urgent for me to say, let's help these people. And but I think we need to look to the future, and especially people, you know, my age and younger. I would rather us just have a completely, it's just voluntary, you know, you set this up when you get a job, and especially if you get a career, you know, I would rather this be a personal responsibility and everyone just know that, instead of having this nation of young people banking on that one day they're going to get it.
For sure. Kind of my last thing, what do you see as being different this election cycle?
I have hope that a lot is different. I think a lot more people are looking for other options, and I think a lot more people are considering the other side's point of view, especially in Iowa. I mean, early on when I was first picking up on what the issues were going to be for this cycle, you had like Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat, and then Robert Kennedy Jr., who was running against Biden in a primary. Now they're like on Trump's kind of advocating for Trump to be the next president. So that was interesting to me, that you had people that kind of shifted from their former parties. And then obviously Kennedy was like one of the big names in politics for the entire planet, so that was pretty huge. But then also Trump came to speak at our Libertarian National Convention, and so did Kennedy, and so did our candidate, Chase Oliver. So to me, that was really helpful and really healthy. And I was actually pretty impressed that one of the major party candidates came and spoke to a crowd that they knew it wasn't going to be always cheers and holding up our signs and just clapping at everything they said. So I was personally impressed that Donald Trump did that and spoke at our convention. And we also learned that there were things like he said he was going to free Ross Ulbricht, he was actually a prisoner over creating this marketplace where people could buy and sell like different kind of drugs, and then obviously got in trouble because there were some illicit substances on there and things like that. But yeah, the fact that we found some common ground, that made me feel good, and I think showed that we can do that at a national political party convention. And actually Biden was invited. So to me, it's not about whether the person accepts the invite. It's important to me that everyone running was invited to come and kind of share this space, and hopefully it goes off without getting into chaos or without somebody getting hurt and all that, and it did. So there's things like that are just breaking new ground that make me hopeful for this cycle, no matter who people choose.
For Libertarians specifically, do you see this election, here in Iowa going any differently?
I felt very good that it was going to go differently, and then obviously we got hit with the ballot curveball, but I still feel like the momentum is there, and no matter kind of what the votes say, we've been talking to people, we've felt the reception from people, and we also have this momentum, especially if Charles does get out there. And I expect there to be competition as long as we keep major party status, that there to be a contested gubernatorial primary. So it'd be Charles Aldrich versus whoever else wants to throw their hat in the ring, or however many people want to. And I think that'll be big. I was part of the first primary back when I ran, and it was me and Jake Porter, and we were on the Iowa Press. We had a real debate, and so I expect those things to happen again, as long as there's that actual competition, inter-party competition, which will be great. I know that the county attorney from Greene County has put it out there, and it's been in the press, that he plans to run against Joni Ernst. So I think that'll be competitive, and at least more competitive than maybe anything that's happened in the past. And that's all you can really do when you're building a multi-party system from a lot of people dead set on a two-party system.
And then is there anything else that you would like to mention?
Just that www.marcoforcongress.com, the number 4, I think I get into it more than the other people do. If you just Google my name, I think I've done more interviews, more press. I think there's more about me out there than the other two so far, which is absurd to me, but I've been working hard, and my team's been working hard. So yeah, I think if you're not super thrilled with the other two people, do write in Marco Battaglia, or do just vote NOTA, but definitely make your voice heard either way, because we need to show that we're not on this path to to war, or especially civil war, like some of the doomsayers are on about. I don't think we are, but we need to, especially the younger people, need to make it known that that's not what they want, because apparently there are some people that are very worried about that, and we need to move away from that kind of talk and that kind of thinking, is my hope.